Welcome, everyone. Now, the Israeli regime continues to be the leading authority when it comes to violating international laws and norms. The entity in Tel Aviv has committed so many war crimes in Gaza in the last 10 months, it can keep prosecutors busy for decades adjudicating. From a wholesale slaughter of civilians, withholding food and medicine as a war tactic, targeting health, sanitation, and education infrastructure, to killing kids, doctors, medics, and journalists, carrying out attacks on sovereign countries in the region and pitting Arab leaders against one another, and targeting top resistance leaders, both military and political figures, has sent ripples of insecurity and instability throughout West Asia, a region that is truly fed up with Washington and Tel Aviv's adventurism and is about to push back in a very decisive manner. This is the topic of this episode of your Press TV's Spotlight. Joining us is Don DeBar, radio host and journalist from CPR News from Ossining, New York. And Zakir Ahmed Mayet, attorney, activist, and political analyst, joining us out of Johannesburg. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program here. I hope you're both safe and doing well. Don DeBar out of New York, we're going to start with you. Iran's new president, Don Masoud Pezeshkian, said that why are we, Iran, always expected to reduce regional tensions due to Israel's adventurism, exercise restraint when Israel behaves recklessly? Why is the onus always put on us instead of them?
This is actually something I know something about. I'm the oldest of 6 children. And this was my question to my parents most of the time that I was growing up. They would, say they're going out to dinner or something, and they would leave me in charge, my next oldest brother and I, of the other 4 children. We would have to work, basically, and maintain them while they got to scamper and play and do whatever crazy, reckless things children did. You're the grown-up in the neighborhood. There's a responsibility that comes with that. There's also a destiny that comes with that. Israel, such as it is a passing flash in that area. With the mythology of it being eternal, it is actually a rather, momentary phenomenon that has a very short life. And what Iran has to do, and the rest of the region really has to do, is survive it, period. Wait it out. It'll be gone soon enough. There's no need to risk anything larger than you have to risk in order to get past Israel, because it'll be gone soon enough of its own design.
All right, good stuff. Don and Zakir, welcome to the conversation. Your initial thoughts, and I love Don's analogy there and his comparison, but it's just lacking one thing, and that's the fact that a family unit, there's a lot of love involved, and so guess what? You kind of, you sacrifice out of the sake of kinhood, of love, but the Israeli regime only loves itself and basically despises the region with everyone in it.
Most definitely. I agree with Mr. DeBar that the Israeli entity is a temporary entity. The problem is that it is backed by one of the erstwhile superpowers, hyperpowers I would say, but now a superpower. And the field is now no longer a unipolar world, it's a multipolar world. And we see this within the context of the empire. When we talk about the empire, it's very clear to see right now with the number of assets that are coming into the region, US assets, F-22 Raptors coming into Al Udeid Air Base, the NATO AWACS are all airborne, the E-3 Sentries are all airborne, French planes are airborne to protect Israel. So what we are talking about now is the entire structure of imperialism coming to bear to protect the illegitimate state of Israel. Israel has committed genocide. I don't think it is questionable any longer. And I think the grotesque nature of this genocide has been exposed in the most recent videos that have been leaked from the prison, where it clearly shows how Israeli soldiers are raping Palestinian prisoners. In fact, a survey was done on an Israeli channel, and 47% agreed that it is okay, it's legitimate to use rape as a tool during this particular war. This is a very disturbing fact, but it lends credence to the version of my fellow panelists that an entity of this nature can only be temporary. It cannot continue, and much like the apartheid regime in South Africa, so too does the apartheid regime in Israel have a limitation and has an expiry date. However, the problem with these types of regimes is that towards the end of their life, they become extremely violent, and the difficulty here that we have is that South Africa had a few nuclear weapons. It was meant as the final card. Funny enough, given by Israel, the nuclear triggers came from Israel. But in the case of Israel, they are willing to exterminate not only themselves, but everyone in the region. And this is under the Samson principle, and we've already seen how they've used the Hannibal Directive. So extremely dangerous. And the onus, I agree, should be on Israel right now to restrain itself. In fact, I had the conversation with a colleague this afternoon. Why is it that Israel goes ahead, assassinates leaders in different capitals of the world, violating diplomatic protections, and then the rest of the world have to restrain their responses? But I guess it's what my colleague says is that responsibility, long-term vision, and Iran is a responsible nation, but a violation of honor cannot be accepted.
Interesting take, Zakir. And Don, you want to weigh in on Zakir's take there that when it comes to Israel's adventurism in the region, at this point, it's behaving like a wounded and dangerous animal. I like that analogy, but also, how do you assess the impacts of Israel's behavior in the region over the last 5 or 10 years and the impacts it has on the security and stability of West Asia?
Yeah, I think the characterization is accurate. And I think that the analogy to that kind of behavior to a wounded animal is accurate also. And I think it should be considered also in the context of the empire, the American or European or whatever colonial empire. It's wounded now. It's look, I'm looking at China, how China has risen as against the empire, against the U.S. and the EU particularly. Over the last 35 years or so, and the methodology that's been used to just assemble, alliances based on mutual interests, win-win. This is the model for the civilization that will survive if we do survive. If we get through this period with the empire collapsing now, where you have everywhere someone has a finger and a button, a Samson option, and the larger the set of characters, the more likely that the psychopathy of the person with the finger on the button will cause them to actually push it and take us all down with the temple. If we survive that, however, the model that will replace it and allow us to continue our existence and to thrive will be one that's based on this collaborative model. And I think that this is the strength that we have, all of us, those that oppose this empire, this type of world, for whatever reason, and wherever we're located. And that includes a responsibility to look at the material consequences of every action that we take, which is not something that the other side does. And to make sure that even though this might be more just in the short term, or might give more emotional satisfaction or honor in the short term, that the thing that will allow us to survive from one move to the next and enhance our position for the following move is the one that we need to take, that we owe that to ourselves, actually.
Interesting. As Zakir, now you very well know 57 nations just showed up and attended this extraordinary session of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, called for by Pakistan and Iran. They all condemned Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh's assassination in Tehran and said it is within Iran's full right to respond in kind to that martyrdom. How do you see things playing out?
I think this follows through with what we've been discussing with Mr. DeMar, is that Iran has acted in a very responsible manner. The Islamic Republic is not one that is irrational and brash. No, it acts in a very responsible manner. And by calling an emergency meeting of the Islamic organizations, What it's done is that it's taken the entire region into its confidence. They have not retaliated and risked an open war with Israel. Right now, it's been wars of attrition, but this would inevitably open up direct confrontation with the Zionist entity. And the spillover is not just in the Islamic Republic, or whether it is Lebanon or Syria, or whether it is in Yemen. It's going to be the entire Near East. That's exactly what the organization is for. It's all of these nations are going to be affected. And that is what it means to be responsible, to consult, to understand what are the implications of the actions that we are going to take. And after this rendition by the Islamic Republic, the statement has been quite clear that they hold Israel fully responsible for the actions, namely the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas. So this is an act of responsibility, and it also builds off what my colleague has said, that the system that is going to replace the imperial system is definitely one that we are going to be seeing, one of cooperation. That's exactly what we are seeing now. We see the seeds of this going forward, and I believe that the peoples of these various countries, the United States, Europe, those in the Islamic Republic, those in China, those in Russia, and everywhere else, they are going to build a new set of rules and laws that will be just, not just protecting one group of people or not applied uniformly. And I think this is the positive action that comes out of this meeting called by the Islamic Republic and Pakistan.
Thank you. And Don, Iran's acting foreign minister at that meeting, at that OIC meeting, Ali Bagheri Kani, he called Israel's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran a, quote, costly strategic mistake. My question to you, how long and how far did Israel really think it's going to push the line engaging in these nefarious actions without having to be held seriously to account?
Me?
Yeah, it's for you, Don.
Okay. Well, I mean, I understand the complexities here for sure. First of all, you have the contradiction between the interests of the people that live in the territory they call Israel, they call Palestine, whatever, and the interests of the people who are driving the ship of state, so to speak, of the state of Israel. The contradiction also, not just between the government and people that live in that region, but of the government officials and the government, particularly the contradiction between the interests personally of Netanyahu in staying out of prison, and so trying to stoke this thing for as long as he can so he can sit in that seat and enjoy immunity, as against the interests of that state, no matter what its intent is, no matter how malevolent, be able to sustain that in the face of him pursuing his own interests instead of the state interest. And of course, the people there have been whipped up into a frenzy, the Europeans, the settlers, whatever you want, the Israelis, to where they believe all this crazy stuff about having the right to rape prisoners and the right to kill children and all these other things are the way for them to sustain their own future, when what they are doing is condemning themselves to an early death and then hell. And I'm an atheist, and I believe they're condemning themselves to a hell by doing this to other people, because there's no future for humanity there. And yet, this is what's being reproduced over and over under the conditions that exist just in that one country. It has no future. The future lies elsewhere, for that land, for the people that inhabit it, no matter where they came from and what they believe, and for the people that will inhabit it in the future, and for the rest of us, by the way.
Interesting. And Zakir, Yemeni and Hezbollah leaders Abdul Malik al-Houthi and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah both have alluded now to a strong, unified, and a coordinated operation against Israel involving multiple resistance factions and Iran against the Israeli regime. And your thoughts on, I don't know, it just seems like such irresponsible warcraft by the regime to put itself in this situation, unless it did it deliberately, trying to pull in its Western allies. If it wasn't, because a lot of them don't have the stomach to come back into the region for another drawn-out, protracted conflict. They've been here before. They've suffered nothing but losses here in the past. So why would they want to come back, and not for their own interest, but that of Israel's?
I think there's a very interesting point here, is that the United States, despite the fact that they have spoken about a de-escalation and trying to prevent a larger war, especially so close to an election, the other aspect is that they have been funding Israel, they have been weaponizing Israel. Israel has been asking to do so to complete the job, so to say, in Gaza, which it has completely failed at doing. In fact, General David Petraeus has commented about this, and he spoke about the operations in Iraq and Mosul particularly, and how it differs greatly from what the Israelis are doing. The Israelis have demonstrated no win whatsoever. Hence, we see these reckless acts of assassination, both of Commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut and Ismail Haniya in Tehran. There's a second aspect of this, and this is found not on the superficial levels or in the media reports, but you'll find this deep within the military analysis from the Zionist regime itself. And this comes from a senior researcher and professor of the Begin Sadat Center, where he says that the only way to solve the problem, both in the north and the south, is to connect the arenas and to launch a war on Lebanon. They know that it's going to be painful. They know that it's going to bring Israel very close to the brink of complete destruction. But they are banking on the fact that the United States and the international community, together with the United Nations, will then impose a ceasefire both on the north as well as on Gaza. That is the game plan. What the wild card was, and no one expected, was that they would strike the Islamic Republic of Iran as well and draw the Islamic Republic into this. So this does create the pool that is much larger than originally expected. The problem with this theory on Israel's part is that they believe it will follow a linear trajectory. When you play with fire in the manner that they have, it never follows a linear trajectory. And that's the problem with this entire plan. The only way to resolve the conflict is to acknowledge the writing on the wall, as the apartheid regime did in South Africa, that this is an unsustainable program. The Zionist project is unsustainable. It is a foreign entity amongst the people. And the only way to resolve this is through the dissolution of the state and for full integration with the people. One person, one vote. That's effectively what the solution is. But Israel, because of its ideology, of its structuring, will not do so. And the unfortunate facts before us is that Israel has completely miscalculated. The resistance is now calculating how they are going to attack, and there's going to be ladders and grades of escalation. And unfortunately, because of the arrogance of the leadership of Israel, I believe that they will draw this into not just a regional war, but we are already seeing the makings of a global war. We've seen on the one side General Michael Kurilla, the U.S. general sitting with his Israeli counterparts. We've seen former Defense Minister General Sergei Shoigu coming into Tehran, meeting with the Security Councils there. These are big moves on an international field, and I think that it will definitely spiral out of control. But the only people that are going to survive are those of the axis of resistance. I can't see Israel and the United States surviving in this new world.
And that's interesting that Zakir should say that, Don, because Iran's acting foreign minister at that same OIC session in Jeddah said, saying exactly, he said that Israel simply does not have the capacity right now or the strength to counter Iran. But as you very well know, what Zakir said, Iran is not alone. It's accompanied by all the resistance basically in West Asia at this point. Everyone's on edge. Everyone is irate. Everyone's anticipating a response. So to Zakir's point, is this irresponsible warcraft, or is this a deliberate manufacturing of pretext to pull the West into a huge regional conflict?
Well, look, I mean, that's the dynamic that you basically see developing no matter what the intent was going into it. This is the danger with the war in Ukraine. It has been. It doesn't follow a linear path. The other is absolutely correct again. There are unpredictable aspects, particularly with an analysis based in the arrogance of impunity and the sense of absolute power. People miscalculate under normal circumstances, when they're infused with the psychosis of omnipotence, they make more mistakes. When you place people in a condition of an existential threat repeatedly, on occasion they mishandle that, and the existence of everyone becomes threatened or unsustainable. It is quite possible for Israel or whomever ends up with their hands over control of the buttons and the weapons of that country to blow them up either in a crazy man scenario because they bluffed and somebody didn't or whatever, or just some accident. These happen too. That it just causes another layer of escalation because they're running them hot in preparation for use or whatever. It's also quite possible that the scenario that they have rolled out for us is going to be absorbed and managed and in essence buried over short or medium term by the responsible actions of the players who see that the future is theirs and that the future is a better one than the one that's been offered for the last 400 or 500 years or whatever to most of us by European colonialism, and that it is definitely possible to fight back. We've seen that. We've seen that the Israeli army, for all of its might and power and alliances and whatever other relationships you want to characterize as with the U.S. military, et cetera, has been stalemated. It can kill a lot of people.
Don, I only have about
things, but it can't win.
Thank you. I don't have much time left. Let me check the clock there, but I really want to get this last question out to you, Zakir. So if you could, my question is kind of long, but if you could offset it with a shorter answer. The 10 months prior to Operation Al-Aqsa flood, the new Israeli quote-unquote far-right cabinet subsided over daily raids throughout the occupied West Bank, a record over 700 reported settler attacks against Palestinians and their property, a serious uptick on restrictions at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, attacks on worshippers inside the mosque, and dozens upon dozens of goods trucks being held up for record times, weeks at a time, from entry points of getting goods into and out of Gaza. Very aggressive plans also for settlement construction. It seems, Zakir, that this particular cabinet came to power to not work for its Israeli population, but strictly against the Palestinian population in occupied lands.
Unfortunately, this was the condition of the population when they voted this group in. We must bear in mind that the ideology at the time was that there is an internal threat because of what happened during Saiful Quds, and therefore we need a more extreme approach to the Palestinians. Hence we have the polls that we see now, 47% agreeing that rape is legitimate, it's fine. So this gives us an indication that there's a psychosis within the society. And what this does is that it shows that it's a society about to fall apart, about to break. And that is why we're seeing mass amounts of brutality, these extreme measures. They are pulling out every stop. This is the last battle of Israel. I don't see it going further. I don't think we can go back to how the world was on the 5th of October. It's the end of the state.
Gentlemen, thank you both and stay safe to both of you here. Don Dabar, radio host and journalist, joining us from New York, and Zakir Ahmed Mayet there, joining us out of Johannesburg, South Africa. And viewers, this brings us to the conclusion of this segment of your Press TV Spotlight program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.